Hi, I'm Helen Oakwater and I'm here with Olive Hickmott, the author of 6 books and a 7th on the way. And Olive is going to talk to us about mental imagery and learning difficulties. Olive is, what are you?
I'm a forensic learning coach. So that means
a forensic learning. Okay, so we all like to know what is a forensic learning coach?
That means you work out why people can't learn and you teach them some skills to enable them to learn much easier.
Why people can't, and give them and then teach them some skills. And for those of you watching earlier, Robert Dilts, logical levels. Remember the why up at the top, and then much lower the how-tos, the skills and capabilities. So how do you do that?
Well, I probably have to tell you my story as to how I got into this.
So
I grew up with having really bad literacy, and I actually have a school report that says at the age of 16 it would be helpful if Olive could learn to spell. And I had been in the same school for 12 years, and so whatever they'd done didn't work. And so I carried on. I was really lucky. I was very good at maths, and so I went and did a maths degree because I didn't have to write very much. It was all numbers and things like that, and equations. And so I carried on like that. I got into business. I worked as a software engineer. Strangely enough, you know, there's lots of words in software engineering, but I could do those. And so I went on into, then I got into management, and then various things happened, and I started up my own business as a consultant for bringing new products to market. And I then went on an NLP training, and the lovely Robert Dilts, who you will have seen earlier, had previously created a process called the Nlp Spawning Strategy. I'm sitting in the audience, and I was literally taught in 10 minutes the NLP spelling strategy, and I'm sitting there going, who the blankety blank didn't teach me that when I was at school? Because what the essence of it was, and the original spelling strategy told you exactly what people who are good at spelling do, how they do it. And I went, nobody ever taught me that. And so,
which is the classic NLP way of modeling. How does somebody do something really, really well, and then modeling it, teaching it to somebody else? Classic NLP.
But what we had to do was what happened was I went into my local special needs school and said, I think I've just found something that might be really helpful for literacy. And I happened to know the deputy head teacher there, and he said, yeah, fine. And I said, well, how many people have you got who are struggling with literacy? And he said, I've got hundreds. Which ones do you want? And so I started working with these kids and discovered that although the spelling strategy was good, it didn't actually work all the time for dyslexics. So I started working on what was the difference that made the difference and how I could modify it slightly so it worked for all of these kids. And we had kids going from literally no words to one.
What sort of age were the kids?
Oh, sorry, they were all secondary school.
Secondary school.
Yeah.
So
11. And I had one child who hadn't written a single word since he'd arrived in class, and this was now 9 months later. And I taught him the technique for, I thought I was teaching him how to do, how to spell T-Rex, because he was really keen on dinosaurs. And it turned out he decided to spell Brontosaurus for me. And this child hadn't spelt a single word in 9 months, and he suddenly spelt Brontosaurus.
I can't spell Brontosaurus. That's amazing. I didn't know that. I genuinely didn't know that.
And he was the sort of kid that was autistic, sitting in the corner, tearing up bits of paper beforehand. And so, anyway, so that's how I got into it. And so I got more and more of these kids in special needs school. And so I learned how you had to extend the NLP spelling strategy for a few different things. And before you even get to spelling, you've got to make sure that their mental imagery, which is what I'm meant to be talking about, is that their mental images are under their control. Now, mental images are those things you have in your head.
I just want to pause you for a moment. Mental images under your control, because I think that's quite a significant phrase. Okay.
Now, mental images are those pictures you hold in your head. So if I say to you,
and
as the
some
audience,
of us don't realise that we do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I say to you, as the audience, picture a cat, then Helen's eyes immediately shot up. Now, how many cats have you got? One or more? One. What colour is it?
Black.
And how near to you is it?
It was quite far away.
Oh, fine. Okay. So, and if you want to get it to run around, can you do that?
Okay, I'll change it from a cartoon cat. Actually, no, I don't need it. Yeah, okay.
So now you've got it running around.
Yeah, I've got it running around.
Now can you get it to stop?
Yeah.
So you've got mental images that are under control. Big success. That's what everybody ought to be able to do at the age of 4 to 5. But nobody checks what people's mental images are. And the very creative kids have a real problem with getting their mental images under control because they're so busy creating more mental images or getting them to turn into videos or whatever they're doing that they don't even think, they don't know how to control them, which is one problem when you're 4. As you grow up through school, it becomes a nightmare, basically, because children will do all sorts of things. For literacy, they won't be able to keep words still. So in order to spell a word, they won't be able to keep the letters still. And lots of people are diagnosed with letters moving around on the page or letters moving around in their head. And then you will also see children who get more and more mental images. And you see that, you can tell because you see their eyes darting about all over the place because they're following their own mental images. And so as they go up through school, they can get into sensory overload. If they're in sensory overload, I think everybody on the planet knows what sensory overload is like. It's like 50 people asking you questions all simultaneously. Exactly. And you can't cope anymore, so you start shouting at somebody, or you start throwing things at somebody, or you have a meltdown, and it can happen to any of us at any age. And so we have techniques for very, very simple techniques, which most people think is much too simple. Very simple techniques for how do you stop these images moving.
Einstein said you should make something as simple as possible and no simpler.
Yeah.
And that's Einstein. So
absolutely,
we're not going to argue with him.
And so you find these really simple techniques that we've developed that just help the child get in control of their images. And so why wouldn't you do it?
Well, no reason. Of course you do. I mean, do you want to show us how or
yeah, I mean, I can't show you how because you've got control over your mental image.
Okay, so I've got control over my mental image, and I've got a cat currently lying on its back and run over. I could, if I choose to, put that on a television screen and maybe make 9 different pictures that I can then see, which I could start moving around or playing with or doing something like that. Now,
the way to stop images moving is to get grounded, to get fully in your body. Okay. Which, very simple technique. If anybody's ever done Pilates or yoga and they want to balance on one leg, they have to be able to get grounded. And the only group of people currently, to my knowledge, and I could miss some, that actually get taught how to get grounded and control their mental images is elite sports people. Because if you think of Tom Daley on the 10-meter board, he's doing a backward handstand, and he's got to be really still or else he'll just fall in the pool. And when he finally decides to jump, that's a jump that he's rehearsed thousands of times in his mental images before he's even tried it.
Yeah.
And so the two things go hand in hand, getting grounded and getting control of your mental images.
And I'm just thinking, Johnny Wilkinson kicking rugby ball. I mean, we've all seen that, and you just know.
Every sport's got it. Golf is another one that's really obvious.
All of them.
They walk up to the golf ball and they wiggle around, so they're getting firmly connected before they swing the club.
And they are firmly connecting to the ground. So they've
Yep.
got the tree roots or whatever process to ground themselves in their body and to the earth.
Yep. Now, I would like to say at this point that this connection is not known about. A few people know about the Nlp Spawning Strategy, but they have no idea about how it relates to learning difficulties. And I've now worked with kids who are who've got dyslexia, who've got dyscalculia, because one of the problems is that they haven't got mental images of numbers, and dysgraphia, where they have difficulty writing because they've got no mental images of letters, so they don't know what to copy down from their head.
Sorry, can I just pause you at that moment? And if you think about the complexity of a series of writing, reading, taking something from the board, taking it inside, having to then write it, that is executive functioning skills. And that sometimes is something that children with trauma have challenges in. They have to hold things in the short-term memory. It's the sort of thing that trauma can get in the way of, but by understanding processes like this, it's actually going to give a roadmap for a child to actually do this. And so because it's also looking at the why around the learning difficulties. Sorry, interrupting you.
No, it's all right. And the anxiety, the stress, the not feeling safe, all of those things which belong in your world of adoption are really significant in not feeling grounded. You're just not safe, so you'd be better off out of your body.
If you don't feel safe in your body, you don't feel safe anywhere. How do you do that?
And then I went on to, having developed programs for teaching people with the basics of academic skills, literacy, numeracy, comprehension, all of that stuff. I've now gone on to ADHD and Asperger's and autism. And before I mention anything about that, I should just say I'm not seeking to cure any of these things, but what I'm saying is that the mental images that people hold and are confusing the hell out of them are very significant. They have very significant connections with learning difficulties. And that is something that nobody, as far as I know, else is working on for ADHD, Asperger's and autism.
And you've been doing this now for what? I mean, it must be
15
years. Yeah.
And so for ADHD, they tend to have, you can tell ADHD kids because their eyes are going like this all over the place. But they're sort of following their own, they're doing what she's doing. Yes. They're following their own pictures at great speed. And they're the sort of people that will, when they're trying to explain something, will go from A to Z without telling you the steps of B, C, D, and E, because they've got very fast brains, fantastic skill. But when you've got anything up to 100 mental images flying past you at once, you really have to work very hard to keep track.
And overwhelming.
Yeah, totally.
Utterly overwhelming.
And so then we come up to autism, where they've seem to have no structure. So they've just got boom, 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 mental images flying at them from all over the place, some of which may be very scary, some of which may be quite sensible. But again, it gets back to getting control of your mental images and getting grounded and fully in your body. Now, some things like sensory overload take a bit more time to get people comfortable there because they've been doing this for years, and it's really I say it takes longer. It might take half an hour or an hour to get somebody grounded who's got this chaos going on.
Right. Okay. Yes, she said half an hour to an hour, and I know that you are sitting there going, no. It genuinely is as quick as that quite often. I have seen this. I have trained with Olive. Yes, I know Olive. I've done her courses. I have worked with people. I have seen this work. I have recommended Olive and other people doing this, and had people come back going, "Oh my God, thank you so much," and giving me a whole load of chapter and verse about what their experience was with their child and the transformation that happened. And the thing that, one of the reasons I love what you do is you've got that why. And I start with why. You've got the why. If you understand that mental images are going around the whole time, if you stop them, then you can
changes.
get a sense of calm, and as you say, the world changes. And if you think about traumatized children, they are going to be wired, and a lot of this is going to be going on for them. And certainly in my experience, what happens sometimes with traumatized children is they're getting these mental images, and some of them are images of the past that are floating by, and they are images from the time of trauma. And I can think of a child who would look down and would see an event that he had, an event, pretty horrible. And every time he looked down, that was the image he got. So not surprisingly, he wasn't into writing. So these sorts of things were absolutely invaluable.
What also amazed me is that when I was told that people who developed autism tended to be okay on their developmental milestones until about the age of 2, and then it started going backwards, and I'm going, how on earth does that happen? And there was all sorts of rumours going around about injections and everything else. And I thought, no, okay, that's a possibility, but let's see if there's anything else that can happen. Now, if you think about it, a child can recognise their parents at 6 weeks old. We know that because when they go in for a health check, the nurse says to them, does the child smile at you? The only way they do that is because they've got a mental image in their head of you. And if you wear a pink curly wig, they'll cry because that's not my mum. So that's really simple. So we know they've got mental images when they're young. And so the next thing is that if they're out of their body and not fully grounded, which normally happens a bit later in life, sort of 6, 7 year old, but if they're really out of their body, they're accessing too much information, and they can get completely bewildered by it. So my theory is that by the age of 2, they're going, I've had enough, I can't stand this anymore, I'd rather sit in the corner and play with my toys. And it's about feeling safe in your body. I keep coming back to that because we know it's absolutely about feeling safe. And we're not saying that parents are being nasty to their kids at all. What we're saying is inside they don't feel safe.
It's the neuroception. It's the autonomic nervous system and the neuroception, and the body is saying, do I need to be in fight, flight or freeze because of what is going on? And that's what's happening inside the child. So it's not related to an external event. It's the intrinsic. Am I feeling safe? Have I got safety markers around? That's the thing that's significant.
And we actually had a male patient recently who was very unsafe in hospital, who I watched develop autistic traits, one after another, such as playing with the spots on his pajamas, closing down his peripheral vision, so he closed off a lot of what's going on around him, couldn't touch him, couldn't do injections, couldn't do anything like that. So he was in sensory overload. And because of my experience, I knew what was going on here. And the biggest thing we did with him was to help him get grounded, feel safe. And after about 12 hours of this, he came round and got his ability to speak, eat, drink, and sleep back again. And so he just had a little taste of autism.
Powerful stuff. It is.
If you think of these autistic traits, you can look at each one of them and go, okay, so what's going on here? What's happening? You know, if a child, for example, is sitting in the corner playing with lining up toys, right, like they do, lots of them do that, amongst the headbangers as well. But if you think of the kids who are lining up cars, they're very safe lining up cars. I haven't got a car here, but like a pencil, because what they've done is they've closed down their peripheral vision. That keeps them out of sensory overload, so they're only watching the car or maybe another car next to it, and they can safely line those up, and they're just using their central vision. And their central vision you have to be quite close to, and it doesn't give you 3D, it only gives you 2D of the image, and so that's why they're lining up cars. So every autistic trait, well, most of the ones I've looked at so far, you can think of a mental imagery reason for why they're doing what they're doing. Yes,
if I or what viewer wanted to find out,
yeah,
I have no idea what the answer to this is. It may be a horrible question for you. How do I find that out? How do I find out these things? I mean, I know you've written books, but you've got all this information. How do other people?
Well, we have a couple of training courses. You can do those, but the one is on literacy and numeracy and academic skills, and the other one is on how to get to understand what's happening with a child on the spectrum.
Okay.
So those two things, and we do coach people and we do train people, etc. To get to, if you want to question what your child is doing, really start looking at what they're doing, try and help them feel safe in every single thing they do, and you'll probably find that they can come out and be more with you rather than buttoned up in the corner on their own.
And what I would say is that you have to think about what is going on inside the child. This is not about the environment you're providing. You have to step into the shoes of the child and see what they think feels safe. And it might be that labels, you know, some kids, you have to cut the labels out because it's really irritating me, and I can't. So that's something that for one child might be a big issue. For another one, it might be the sound of the fridge. How do you deal with that? So getting specific, but you've got to stand in your child's shoes and step away from any thought that it's something that you are doing and it's your fault. Step into the child's shoes.
These kids have brilliant parents, they just don't have the education.
And it's the tools to transformation.
I've just got to say, about going back to grounding a minute, if you are not fully in your body, nothing works terribly well. And you get very sensitive to things. So you do get sensitive to the labels in the back of your neck. You do get, I mean, I worked with a woman yesterday for 5 minutes who I said, I just happened to be talking about autism, and I said, a lot of the kids, actually, when they're older and you can talk to them, if with luck, they've got their language back. And they said, they've told me that they can hear the mains, as in the electricity running around underneath in the wires. And so this girl, she said, I was just telling her this story, and she said, I can't hear the mains, but I've got some crackly noise going on. And we looked at the other people in the group, and nobody else had got the crackly noise going on. So I stood up and got her grounded. And then she looks at me and she goes, my word, it's gone. Because you're up here somewhere and you're accessing more information than you should be.
And this links to polyvagal theory. When you start diving into that, there are some connections with what's happening in the head, and particularly there's some elements of the ears which I haven't got my head around yet. I'm still digesting that link to how the autonomic nervous system is functioning, and that fits in with all of this. It's like there are masses of pieces of jigsaw that fit together.
Yes, and I'm busy putting them together.
And you are. And honestly, Olive works so hard. Olive, she's amazing. We are friends. Clearly. We are.
By the way, if you just want to know more about mental imagery, because nobody knows about it, and there is, apart from my books, there is almost nothing written on it, is that go to that website there and sign up for newsletters or whatever, but also come. Once a month I run 2 teleworkshops for free, so that people can just come along with little or no experience and ask questions about mental imagery. So please come join us.
And they are great. So Olive Hickmott, forensic learning coach. It has been an absolute delight. Thank you. And we are closing this down, and then we're going on to some how-tos relating to this. So don't go away. Take good care. Just getting up before the end of the video.
How do I
Hang on.
put the link to this?
Hang on. Well, you can't yet.
Oh.